Heyo! This video was made during the writer's strike and actor's strike currently going on. I am in full support of paying writers and actors fair wages and giving them the means to not live in poverty. Links in the description below to help fund writers and actors currently striking right now. Boop, boop. This is the spoiler alarm. Get out now while you still can. Boop, boop. Final warning. Boop. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, a revolutionary concept in the film industry of combining all of its Marvel characters and crafting a cinematic world that all of the stories and characters occupy. A novel idea that, over the last decade, has become commonplace. Most of these movies are so intrinsically linked together that it somehow feels like homework to be able to understand what's happening in the newest Avengers movie. But the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy has always felt like its own thing. Not only does it have James Gunn's distinctive style that you feel in every frame, but also truly memorable characters that no matter how absurd conceptually they may be, the audience connects with them. You can watch the entire trilogy without any need for information from the rest of the MCU. Well, not exactly. And that is part of the problem.
We'll all fly away together. Into the forever and beautiful sky.
After 6 long years, we have finally seen the conclusion to James Gunn's epic space opera, and it's unsurprisingly great. The movie that really solidified my opinion on James Gunn's directing and writing capabilities was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I had been passively enjoying the MCU up to 2017, but it wasn't until the second Guardians film that any Marvel movie had any actual effect on me emotionally. It also introduced the first good villain to the universe, and keep in mind, this was before all the villains like Thanos and Killmonger. Sure, we had Loki, but he's barely a villain when you look at him in the grand scheme of the MCU. Not only did Guardians 2 create a great villain, but a great story that actually felt important to these characters. With Guardians 3, you can add another excellent villain to that list. Chakotay Iwuji is so good as the High Evolutionary. Sometimes it's really great to have a villain who is just a straight-up evil guy rather than a sympathetic villain. It's just nice to have an incredibly hateable villain that you just want to see the main characters overcome. Everything he does is completely unforgivable, and that menace is so important in Rocket Raccoon's backstory. And speaking of Rocket, he is the main character of the movie. It basically spells it out for you on almost all the posters. I think making Rocket the main character was a great idea. He is such an interesting character that he needed to have his story told in one of these movies. And he's a raccoon that's voiced by Bradley Cooper. The action scenes are immaculate, the set design and art direction is wonderful, the VFX is amazing. There's a couple shots that look a little unfinished, but all the other VFX is immaculate. All of Rocket's friends have really interesting designs and they look so good. The scene in which Rocket is dying on the operating table and Peter Quill is screaming for his best friend not to die. It really got to me. It was a scene about a talking raccoon dying on an operating table, and Chris Pratt was crying over his corpse.
Well,
I'm not gonna lose him.
He's gone.
I'm not letting him go!
I was wrecked. I was crying over a talking raccoon. If James Gunn can make an idea as outlandish as that work, then he can do anything. Superman? Piece of cake. This movie is an easy 7 out of 10, but it's really close to an 8. Everything about this film is the perfect recipe for a great Marvel movie. With the one issue being the elephant in the room, Gamora.
Oh, please.
You see, the idea of a cinematic universe is really cool, as I've stated. However, when you make a massive universe of characters that interact and all have an overarching storyline, there might be some issues that crop up as a side effect of a shared universe. James Gunn had already planned out the structure and basic layout of the entire trilogy during the creation of the first Guardians film. One of the through lines for the Guardians trilogy was the relationship between Peter Quill and Gamora. Their relationship had been building up to them eventually getting together, and it hadn't happened yet because both characters still had a lot of growing to do. These characters would have presumably finished their arcs by the third movie, and would finally come together at last. The entire trilogy has a very nice flow to it that usually a lot of the other MCU trilogies just don't have. When other trilogies in the MCU have consistency issues, it's usually due to changes in directors or a shift in the overall direction of the universe. For example, the first two Thor movies are so wildly different from the third and fourth movie because audiences were not connecting with that character and his world. So Taika Waititi was brought in as a new creative voice to reinvent the character, which led to the creation of Thor Ragnarok, which is great, by the way. It's drastically different in tone from the first two movies, and it's not really consistent with the entire series of Thor movies. It's still good, but it's inconsistent with the overall picture of Thor in this universe. Then Taika went on to make Thor Love and Thunder, which is a different discussion. James Gunn is one of the few cases where he actually got to direct the entire trilogy and bring his creative vision to life. James had his layout and basic structure set for the Guardians trilogy, and everything was going great. The first two movies were big hits both financially and critically. He was gearing up for the third installment, and his career was thriving. Then he got fired by Disney for some edgy tweets from 10 years ago that led him to be fired and then hired by Warner Bros. DC to make an actual good Suicide Squad movie, which is one of the best DC movies we've had in the last decade, and then when enough time went by, he was rehired by Disney to finish the Guardians trilogy, but other than that, he was good. James was back and ready to finish his trilogy, but before he could get to it, a little indie movie came out. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. Yes, Avengers Infinity War came out before Guardians 3, and hey, that's okay. It's to be expected to have a couple of wrenches thrown in your plans along the way because that is a possibility when it comes to a shared universe. And as long as nothing drastic happens to the Guardians, James will be in the clear. Oh. Gamora dies in Infinity War, which sucks. And I'm not bashing Infinity War either. It's one of the best MCU movies. It's honestly really, really good. Gamora's death is pulled off really well and it's very emotional. It's a big moment in the story that really rattles a lot of the characters. And of course Gamora and Nebula would play a big part in the story of Infinity War because the main villain, Thanos, is their evil and abusive father. But now we have a major issue, because Gamora is dead, and Guardians 3 hasn't happened yet. Well, actually, Gamora isn't dead because an alternate version of her is brought back into our timeline by the end of Endgame, and that version is lacking all of the character growth our Gamora had from the first two Guardians films, so she's back because of time travel, and now the version we have is an entirely different person. So what does this mean? Now what? This was the pickle that James Gunn had found himself in. He still has to tell the conclusion of his epic space trilogy, but now, one of the main characters that is integral to the story and other characters' arcs is dead. Well, not dead, she's a different person, I already explained this. I have massive respect for James Gunn, because he was able to roll with the punches. This was not a cop-out. He didn't try to cram this new Gamora into an arc and force the ending he originally planned. This Gamora was never going to fall in love with Peter, because this isn't the old Gamora. This is a different person, at a different point in her life. This arc that Peter ends up having, maybe it's more interesting than what we were supposed to get in the original. Peter has to let Gamora go. And so he does. Although Gunn really rode this wave as smoothly as he could have, I can feel his irritation in this movie. This scene just looks like James Gunn is talking through Peter, and he sounds kinda pissed. I'm not surprised that Gunn has resentment towards the MCU and Disney as a whole. They forced him to restructure his finale, and I'm sure he never forgets that he was fired for such a ridiculous thing. But with all of that weighing this movie down, it still turned out good. It's still a great finale for these characters and a great trilogy for the MCU. It's the best trilogy in the MCU, and I say that with absolute confidence. It actually feels like this story has an ending, in which every other Marvel project is never allowed to end. And personally, I'm done with the MCU. This was my last major holdout for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'll check out another project if it piques my interest in the future. I think I might watch Loki Season 2, but other than that, I'm just not that invested in the future of this universe anymore. I just don't care very much. And I'm definitely not going to watch all the Disney Plus shows. That is such a massive time commitment for most of them to end up being an average show. What the hell is even going on over there? Even though Guardians 3 didn't end up the way fans were expecting, or even the way James was expecting, it turned out alright in the end. And James can take this situation as a learning experience for the future. I haven't mentioned it yet, but James Gunn is now running the entirety of the DC universe. He's now the Kevin Feige equivalent for DC. And it's definitely not a simple task. He's coming into this with so much opposition. It's not as simple as starting from the ground up like Phase 1 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe did. Gunn is coming into DC looking like this. The DC movies have been such a scattershot shitshow over the last decade. There is so much division in the fanbase and overall direction of the universe that it's going to be an uphill battle for Gunn and his co-lead Peter Safran. Let me explain the situation as quickly as I can. The universe started with the mediocre Man of Steel. With that being the beginning of the universe, it was already off to a rough start, and with such a poor understanding of the character of Superman, it was not an ideal direction for the universe to be heading in. That was then followed by the horrendous Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. Why did you say that now? And then after that, we got the somehow even more horrendous Suicide Squad 2016.
I have an idea.
Then we got a Wonder Woman movie for the first time in 2017, and it was okay. And after that, we got the DC equivalent to the Avengers, the big team up between all the heroes, the Justice League, which is what burning $300 million looks like.
Oh my God! What's wrong with your face?
Justice League was when the Snyder cult really came to fruition. Zack Snyder left as a director on Justice League due to a family tragedy, and WB used this as an excuse to hire Joss Whedon, the director of the first two Avengers films and also a terrible person, allegedly, and try to turn this movie into the Avengers. This caused many Snyder fans to create the Release the Snyder Cut hashtag. After that, we got Aquaman, which is really good because of how hilariously bad it can be.
Call me Ocean Master.
Then we got Shazam, which is a surprisingly good throwback to the old Raimi Spider-Man movies. After that, we got Birds of Prey, which I have not seen, but it looks like many other people did not see it either. Then we got Wonder Woman 84, which I have also not seen because I've heard how horrendously bad it is. After that, we got Zack Snyder's cut of the Justice League finally released at a massive 4 hours in length, which is better than the original, but still not very good. All this did was reignite the flame under Snyder cultists to harass anyone making a non-Snyder DC project. Then the good Suicide Squad came out, and the fact that it's called The Suicide Squad and not Suicide Squad 2 is very telling that WB wants you to forget about that old one. Following the Suicide Squad movie, we had the Peacemaker HBO Max series. That was also great. Then we got Black Adam. I also have not seen this one, and that brought back Henry Cavill as Superman. Hooray! And then announced a new Superman project with Henry Cavill attached. Awesome! Which was then almost immediately scrapped, and Cavill was recast. Then we got a bunch of other box office bombs with Shazam 2 and The Flash. That's what he's dealing with. I'm excited to see what he does. All of the new projects announced in his new DCU timeline lineup look exciting and also very James Gunn. You got some A-listers in there, but you also have some D-listers in there. I think the Gamora situation in Guardians 3 is really going to be valuable information to bring into his new DC universe. Now he knows what it's like to have someone step on your toes in these massive shared storylines, and hopefully that allows him to be more understanding of someone that was in the position he used to be in. This specific comment from James Gunn really fills me with a lot of confidence in his capabilities, and especially understanding the situation he was just in.
One of the things that's very important for me in all of these movies and TV series is that the director's vision and the vision of the writers and all of the creators is unique and something special. Storytelling is always king. That's all that matters to us.
I have a lot of faith he's going to give us a definitive modern-day Superman story in Superman Legacy. We haven't seen James Gunn work with major A-list characters like Superman and Batman, but I think he'll do a good job. Just the way he talks about what he loves about Superman gives me faith in the future of the DC universe.
But there's this playfulness about Superman, this when he's saving a cat, he's got that wry smile. And that is one of the best parts of the movie is the playfulness of Superman. He enjoys what he's doing. He likes helping human beings and he likes saving them.